And so from September the 11th onwards, we obviously had to deal with Afghanistan, but from that moment, Iran, Libya, North Korea, Iraq, the machinery, as you know, of A.Q. Khan, who was the former benign. So if you were to look at Iran today, the reason why I take and still take a very hard line on Iran and nuclear weapons is not just because of nuclear proliferation, it's because the nature of the Iranian regime makes me even more worried about the prospect of them with a nuclear device.
So you were making this dual argument at the time.
But where countries are engaged in the terror or WMD business, we should not shrink from confronting them. Some can be offered a way out, a route to respectability. I hope in time that Syria, Iran, and even North Korea can accept the need to change their relationships with the outside world. After September the 11th, that changed. And that change, incidentally, I still believe is important for us today. Look, it's the reason today, as I say, I do take such a strong line on Iran or any other nation that tries to develop WMD. I had and I have a view. It's why I think if we want to deal with Iran today, and you've got very similar issues than the ones we're discussing here, which is why learning the lessons of this is so important.
Can you tell us how you saw those links, and again, what evidence you had that there were links? Because, as you know, the Butler Committee has established that there weren't direct links at that time between Saddam and al-Qaeda.
The link was in my mind at that time that there was a proliferation threat that was potentially growing, because we had Iran, we had North Korea, we had Libya, we had Iraq, obviously. I would put a lot of emphasis on the A.Q. Khan activities. My fear was, and I would say I hold this fear stronger today than I did back then, as a result of what Iran, particularly today, is doing. Now, when I look at, because I spend a lot of time obviously out in the region today, when I look at the way that Iran today links up with terror groups, and this is a different topic for a different day, but I would say that a large part of the destabilization in the Middle East at the present time comes from Iran. The link between Iran having nuclear weapons capability and those types of terrorist organization, it's the combination of that that makes them particularly dangerous. And the reason why I think this is a particular danger today is because there are these states, Iran in particular, that are linked to this extreme and, in my view, misguided view about Islam. I think Iran certainly did change its behavior to begin with in respect of its nuclear weapons program. Libya, as you know, at the end of 2003 gave up its WMD program.
It's taken quite a long time to get from that point to having a usable nuclear weapon.
Well, here is the problem, Sir Roderick, and we face, again, exactly the same problem in Iran today. If you say to people, well, how long will it take them to get a...
Iran's much further down the track.
People did not think that al-Qaeda and Iran would play the role that they did. It was the introduction of the external elements of AQ and Iran that really caused this mission very nearly to fail. Fortunately, in the end, it didn't. What really happened was that another assumption that had been made, which was that Iran would basically not be provocative. It might have its interests, but it wasn't going to be provocative. That assumption also started to change. And what happened was that as Muqtada al-Sadr became more powerful, and obviously to an extent backed by Iran, that entered a new dimension into this. And then as 2004 went on and came into 2005, this Iranian issue became much larger. What there wasn't, and this again is of vital importance, and this certainly is a lesson in any situation similar to this, people did not believe that you would have al-Qaeda coming in from outside, and people did not believe that you would end up in a situation where Iran, once, as it were, the threat of Saddam was removed from them, would then try to deliberately to destabilize the country. But that's what they did. I also sent Jack to talk to the Iranians. I mean, a very big lesson of this for me was that we tried with the Iranians, tried very hard to reach out, to, in a sense, make an agreement with them, to give them a strong indication that it wasn't the American forces were not there, having done Iraq, to move through to Iran or any of the rest of it.
And indeed that the Iranians would as well. And as you've just said, they had a destabilizing effect, and they must have enjoyed putting pressure on us and the Americans at a time when we were trying to put them under pressure to deal with their nuclear program.
We did ask for an assessment on Iran particularly. Indeed, you will see through the intelligence assessments in 2002, I am constantly going back and forward. You know, is Iran, and I think I asked this again in February 2003, what's the attitude of Iran going to be? I had actually spoken myself to the president of Iran prior to September the 11th, when we were trying to get the new resolution on sanctions. I'd actually had a telephone conversation with President Khatami at the time, and basically had gone out of my way to say, look, let's have a new relationship and so on. So in respect of Iran, that was the advice, but we did go into this in some detail. My view is if we'd left Saddam there and he'd carried on, as we said, with the intent to develop these weapons and the know-how and the concealment program, and the sanctions had gone, I have little doubt myself, but it's a judgment and other people may take a different judgment, that today we would be facing a situation where Iraq was competing with Iran, competing both on nuclear weapons capability and competing, more important perhaps than anything else, competing as well as the nuclear issue in respect of support of terrorist groups. Yes, absolutely. And what was very clear was that, as I say, this influence of Iran in the situation was growing. We debated a lot what to do with Muqtada al-Sadr. However much you plan, and whatever forces you have, if you have these elements, AQ on the one side, Iran on the other, who are prepared to destabilize, you are going to be in a tough, long drawn out, difficult situation. You know, the AQ and Iran elements became uppermost, and then it really did change into a different type of fight. What nobody foresaw was that Iran would actually end up, in fact, supporting AQ. I mean, everyone, the conventional wisdom was these two are completely different types of people, because Iran is Shia, the Al-Qaeda people are Sunni, and therefore, you know, the two would never mix. It was always going to be difficult once these external factors came into play of AQ and Iran. But sure, when you go into a nation-building situation in the future, I think we will be far better prepared and better educated than we were then. I also think you've really got to look at the issue to do with the nature of this threat, from Al-Qaeda on the one hand, Iran on the other, and the impact that that will have not just on Iraq, but potentially in different arenas right round the Middle East region and beyond. And I think we live in a completely new security environment today. I thought that then, I think that now. It's why I've said this to you a number of times today. I take a very hard, tough line on Iran today, and many of the same arguments apply. Sometimes people will say to me, well, Saddam was a brake on Iran. That actually the best answer to what is happening in Iran is to allow the Iraqi people the freedom and democratic choice that we enjoy in countries like ours.
And among other things, our witness today, Mr. Blair, has drawn attention to a number of dimensions arising out of Iran and its behaviour, which I think we shall want to pursue.
And the single most difficult thing we have to face today, and I think we face it still, I think this is why I personally take a very hardline view on Iran, is the risk of this new type of terrorism and extremism based on an ideological perversion, frankly, of the faith of Islam, combining with technology that allows them to kill people on a large scale. We may look at the world today and say, well, does it really matter? You know, is Iran that much of a threat? Supposing that's, you know, even today, that is the issue. Because as I say, we face exactly the same challenge over Iran. What do? Do you say we've got to change
I'd like to come back to
not?
Iran later on, if I may. I've just been advised that I misled you over quotation. You're meant to quote...
I think it's at least as arguable that he would have been developing in competition with Iran.
But if it may have been, but we come back to the problem.
No, but Lawrence, this is really important. I mean, I would just draw attention also to what they say about Iran too, because basically they conclude, and this is what obviously changed very dramatically. Their basic view is that it is unlikely that Iran would be aggressive.
Mr. Blair, we're going to deal with Iran after the break.
Right, okay.
So can I suggest we take a break at this moment?
The problem, and then General Dutton goes on to say, is mid-2005, because I think his term of duty straddled that period, suddenly it flips. And it flipped not because we weren't taking the right decisions back home, but because the enemy we ended up fighting, which was militia backed by Iran, were causing us the trouble.
We'll come on to the roles of Iran and AQ in a moment. As you've commented yourself, it merits a special section. And you've argued that without the intervention of al-Qaeda in Iran, the situation would have been manageable. That's your phrase.
What I am suggesting, however, is that what gave it a completely different complexion was AQ on one side and Iran on the other. And let me explain that. And secondly, with the roadside bombs, the IEDs, the EFPs and so on, this is where the Iranian part comes in.
Can I just ask two very quick questions on Iran, because we then have to move on? Because, again, Iran you've highlighted as part of the problem. Again, the JIC, as you said earlier...
And, you know, we have been engaging with Iran over this. We've been engaging with the new sanctions debate and so on. And, no, I think and this brings me to my point, because you made a point earlier that I also think needs amendment. How do you deal with al-Qaeda? You can't deal with them unless you deal with the bigger picture, which includes Iran. That's my view. Because I don't think I think Iran took a strategic decision and has now gone down a path of where it believes that it is an existential threat to the maintenance of this theocracy to have progress and modernization happening in that region.
As we've heard from, again, numerous witnesses, was the hope that this would send a very powerful signal to nations like, well, particularly Iran and North Korea, that were trying to develop nuclear weapons. Of course, contacts with Libya were already underway, and as you, I think we discussed last year, led to a success in the autumn of 2003. But Iran with North Korea was a country of highest concern, and it's a country of even higher concern now for exactly the reasons you've given.
I think, to begin with, there was a real pressure on Iran, and I think we restarted negotiations with them over their nuclear program. North Korea came back into six-party talks. I think now we're in a different situation, but I want to make this point very clearly, because it comes out in the paper of Lord Williams. The single thing that is said most often to me in the Middle East by people who opposed what I did was nothing to do with it was a bad idea to get rid of Saddam. But they are well rid of him and believe that. They say you've made Iran more powerful. I'm out. People can take two views about Iran today, but I will give you my view very, very strongly indeed, because this is a looming and coming challenge. I'm out in that region the whole time. I see the impact and influence of Iran everywhere. It is negative, destabilizing. It is supportive of terrorist groups. It is doing everything it can to impede progress in the Middle East peace process and to facilitate a situation in which that region cannot embark on the process of modernization it urgently needs. And this is not because we've done something. You know, at some point, and I say this to you with all the passion I possibly can, at some point the West has got to get out of this, what I think is a wretched policy or posture of apology for believing that we are causing what the Iranians are doing or what these extremists are doing. We're not. The fact is they're doing it because they disagree fundamentally with our way of life, and they'll carry on doing it unless they are met by the requisite determination and, if necessary, force. And the fact is, look, President Obama, not President Bush, no, but this is an important point. President Obama goes in March 2009, he goes to Cairo, right in the heart of Islam. He makes a speech where he says, effectively, put aside the Bush era. I'm now offering you the hand of friendship. You, Iran, can come into partnership. You're an ancient, proud civilization. We will welcome you in. What's the response he gets? They carry on with the terrorism. They carry on with the destabilization. They carry on with the nuclear weapons program. Now, at some point, we've got to get our head out of the sand and understand they're going to carry on with this. And Iraq is one part of a far bigger picture. And right across that region, people are facing that struggle.
You've mentioned quite a lot about Iran.
Fellow panelists just said that the Iranians have admitted that they have a nuclear weapons program, that they're making nuclear weapons. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth. They've denied that they're seeking nuclear weapons over and over again. What they have is a civilian nuclear program which is safeguarded by the IAEA under their safeguards agreement. Any non-nuclear weapons state, such as Iran, which is a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, must have a safeguards agreement with the IAEA, which allows the International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors to monitor their nuclear facilities and verify the non-diversion, as the IAEA has in the case of the Iranians more than a dozen times over the years, including just late last year. They have continued to verify the non-diversion of any nuclear material to a military or other special purpose. So what they're basically saying to you is, we have proved the negative. We have proved what they have not done. They have not diverted any of their nuclear material away. Nobody's accusing the Iranians of producing plutonium or having any plutonium. They're being accused of enriching uranium, but they're enriching uranium to a measly 3.6% industrial grade for use in their electricity program. And then beginning only a couple of weeks ago, when after they accepted Obama's proposal, he refused to accept their acceptance of it, they went ahead and began to enrich a very small amount of this uranium to 20% uranium-235, which still is a far sight from weapons-grade uranium, and it's to be used in their American-built medical isotope reactor in Tehran. However, if you turn it to ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, Fox News, or any of the rest of them, the Fox guys and David Schuster over at the liberal channel, MSNBC, will all agree that there's a scary, dangerous nuclear weapons threat from Iran. And they just figure, you don't know about a safeguards agreement, you don't know about the Non-Proliferation Treaty, you don't know the difference between 3.6% and 90+% uranium-235, and therefore, if you're afraid of getting nuked in your jammies in the middle of the night, you'll let them go ahead and have their war. Last September, Mark Hosenball reported in a web-only exclusive for Newsweek magazine that the CIA and, in fact, the rest of the intelligence community, including the other 16 American intelligence agencies that we know about, that they all agreed and put paperwork on President Obama's desk, a new report on his desk saying that they stand by their conclusion of November 2007, that the Iranians do not have a nuclear weapons program and they have not made the political decision to start one. On February the 15th, the Director of National Intelligence, Dennis Blair, and I forget the gentleman's name, but he's the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, they both sat there sworn under oath before the U.S. Imperial Senate and said, we still stand by the conclusion of the unanimous intelligence National Intelligence Council, representatives of all 16 intelligence agencies from November of 2007. And that is, the Iranians have not made the decision to begin to make nuclear weapons.
There's been some confusion and I think some apparent inconsistencies in our assessment excuse me, of Iran's uranium enrichment activities and their intent. It's my understanding that uranium for civil nuclear power production has to be enriched from 2 to 4%, but that highly enriched uranium, which is necessary for a nuclear bomb or warhead, needs to be enriched to about 90%. Let me ask you first, Director, does the intelligence community believe that as of this time Iran has any highly enriched uranium?
We assess now that Iran does not have any highly enriched uranium.
Now, on March, is your mic on, by the way?
It is now.
Okay, thanks. On March 1st, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Admiral Mullen, was asked if Iran has enough fissile material to make a bomb, and he said, "We think they do." Now, that seems to be different from what you just said the intelligence community thinks, which is that you believe they do not. Have you talked to Admiral Mullen, or what is the explanation for that apparent difference?
Mr. Chairman, Admiral Mullen later issued a clarification that he was referring to low-enriched uranium, not highly enriched uranium.
Now, does the intelligence community assess that Iran currently has made the decision to produce highly enriched uranium for a warhead or a bomb?
We assess that Iran has not yet made that decision.
And in 2007, the National Intelligence Estimate on Iran said that, quote, the intelligence community judges with high confidence that in the fall of 2003, Tehran halted its nuclear weapons program. Is the position of the intelligence community the same as it was back in October of 2007? Has that changed?
Sir, Mr. Chairman, the nuclear weapons program is one of the 3 components required for a deliverable system, including a delivery system and the uranium. But as for the nuclear weapons program, the current position of the community is the same, that Iran has stopped its nuclear weapons design and weaponization activities in 2003 and has not started them again, at least as of mid-2007.
And no, the ability to take a couple of 100 pounds of uranium enriched to 3.6% 235 and turning that into above 90, 94% pure U-235 to making a weapon is not the same as flipping a light switch and taking one day. You're talking still about years and years. Plus, you got to have the metallurgist machine it into the actual pieces, and then you actually would have to have the, I'm not so certain about the terminology. People quibble, they do quibble about what's a delivery vehicle, what's a warhead. A warhead is the bomb. The delivery vehicle is what you put that in. Well, they don't have delivery vehicles and they don't have warheads, so I'm not sure how these things are supposed to hurt any of us. It's just nonsense. Another thing I would like to mention, or try to hit off of something that Mr. Ehrlich said in his talk there, is that a war with Iran would be a disaster.
A leader of a Sunni terrorist group who is awaiting execution in Iran says that his group received orders from the United States to launch terror attacks in Iran. Abdul Hamid Riji, brother of Jundallah group leader Abdul Malek Riji, told reporters his brother was an al-Qaeda point man in Iran 6 years ago, but that later the group broke off ties with him. Riji said, quote, "The United States created and supported Jundallah, and we received orders from them. U.S. officials told us whom to shoot and whom not to. All orders came from them. They told us that they would provide us with everything we need, like money and equipment." Iran has accused Jundallah of launching several attacks inside the country. The group has also claimed a bomb attack on May 28th on the Shia Amir al-Momineen Mosque in Zahedan, in which more than 20 people were killed and 50 wounded. That attack came just weeks before Iran's recent presidential election. The day after the mosque bombing, Iranian officials accused the United States of hiring those behind the attack, linking it to the presidential election.
Of a Sunni terrorist group fighting against Shiites in Iran says his organization has close links with the CIA. The head of the Jundullah group was captured earlier this week in the south of the country. Abul Malik Rigi says he met the US agents in Pakistan who promised support for carrying out terrorist attacks in Iran.
The Americans promised to give us aid. They said they'd cooperate with us and give me military equipment, arms and machine guns. They told me that in Kyrgyzstan they have a base called Manas near Bishkek, and that in a place like this, some high-ranking American person could come and we could reach an agreement on making personal contacts. The Americans said Iran was going its own way, and they said their problem at the present is Iran. Not Al-Qaeda, not the Taliban, their main problem is Iran. One of the CIA officers said that it was too difficult for them to attack Iran militarily, but they plan to give aid and support to all anti-Iranian groups that have the capability to wage war and create difficulty for the Islamic State.
Well, Abul Malik Rigi also says he was captured while on his way to a meeting with a high-ranking American official at the Manas military base in Kyrgyzstan. The US has denied having any links with the group. Investigative journalist Webster Tarpley has the background story on Jundullah.
This is Jundullah, or the Rigi Brothers organization. It's a family firm, you might say, which operates as a terrorist organization. It's widely thought to be based in Pakistan, but it operates in Iran on the other side of that border. And it's also thought to engage in a lot of smuggling, drug running, and now they've branched out into terrorism. They've blown up a mosque, killing 25 people a couple of years ago. Last October, they blew up about 50 Iranians, including some top commanders of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So the guy's now been captured. This Abdul Malik Rigi was the #1 most wanted terrorist on the Iranian most wanted list. And they claim that in a very dramatic action, they caught him when he was trying to fly from Dubai to Kyrgyzstan, and they forced him down in Iran. It's a tremendous victory for the Iranians, because they've essentially decapitated this very, very threatening terror group. And this group has been around, of course, for a long time. Jundullah, just a little bit of background, Seymour Hersh of The New Yorker, the London Daily Telegraph, and Brian Ross of ABC News all agree that they're on the CIA payroll. This is the $400 million in the Iran Regime Change Act approved under Bush. The guy had been meeting with, some say, the NATO Secretary General, Jaap de Hoop Scheffer, met this terrorist, certainly NATO generals in Afghanistan, so they operate as an arm of NATO strategy in the entire region.